I think we should move the wedding up. Ethan said it so casually that at first, it barely registered. He was reaching for the French press on the counter, his hair still damp from the shower, his movements unhurried, confident. Maybe it was the tone of his voice, soft, almost playful, that made me glance up from the stack of legal briefs spread across the kitchen island. My mind was still tangled in merger negotiations, my body running on caffeine and stress. But his words cut through. "What?" I asked, blinking, pen poised above my notes. He smiled. That smile. The one that had charmed me 2 years ago at a charity gala when I first met him. Perfectly symmetrical, warm enough to disarm, sharp enough to intrigue. "Why wait until fall?" he said, pouring the dark coffee into 2 cups like he'd rehearsed the timing. "I just want to start our life together. Sooner rather than later." A strange pressure tightened in my chest. Ethan was a planner. He planned everything, from his tailored suits to the precise aging of a Bordeaux he brought to dinner parties. Every detail in his life was measured, perfected, curated. This sudden impulse to accelerate a wedding, it didn't fit. But I forced a smile. "That's unexpected." He slid a cup toward me, his eyes glinting. "Unexpected can be exciting." I nodded, but the thought slid into the back of my mind, heavy and unwelcome. Something was off. That night, Ethan claimed he had a client dinner. I stayed home, half-heartedly editing a contract while the city lights glowed through the window. Sometime after 9, a notification pinged on my phone. Then another. Bank alerts. At first, I thought they were routine, just the kind of random automated texts that occasionally clutter my inbox. But then I saw it. $9.99 test transaction. $1 authorization hold. Another $9.99, this time from an account I didn't recognize. My heart skipped. These were the tiny charges cybercriminals make before draining an account. A chill crept over me. My accounts were heavily protected, multi-layered passwords, encrypted access. How could this have slipped through? I wasn't ready to confront Ethan. Not yet. First, I needed to understand what was happening. The next morning, instead of meeting my friend Camille for brunch, I drove to my family's brownstone in Lincoln Park. My grandmother's house. My home, the one place that grounded me. But as I pulled up, my stomach twisted. Through the wrought iron gate, I saw a real estate agent on the porch, gesturing animatedly as she led a young couple inside. A tour. My house. I froze. My hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. I had never put the property up for sale. Never even considered it. The couple nodded eagerly as the agent pointed to the stained glass windows, the ones I'd restored myself last summer. The agent's voice floated through the crisp morning air, light and cheerful. She was selling my family's home. No. Not possible. Unless. My pulse hammered as a sickening realization coiled in my gut. Ethan. I forced my shaking hands to dial the only person I trusted with something like this, Luke Dawson. Luke was a private investigator I'd used once in a corporate case. He was thorough, discreet, and fearless. "I need you to pull every financial move Ethan has made in the last 6 months, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Consider it done," he replied without hesitation. By the time I returned to my apartment that evening, Luke had already sent me the first piece of evidence. A forged deed transfer. Filed last week. Signed with my name. The world tilted. This was real. Ethan hadn't just dipped into my bank account. He had forged legal documents to steal my property. And then came the second message from Luke. He's done this before. Twice. Boston. Miami. Both women were high-powered professionals like you. Both lost everything. One vanished from the industry. The other went bankrupt trying to fight. My stomach churned. This wasn't a mistake. Ethan wasn't just a liar. He was a predator. The next morning, I did what I never imagined I'd have to do. I sat across from Judge Evelyn Foster. She was a woman I'd admired since law school, known for her sharp gray eyes and a reputation for dismantling corporate fraud with surgical precision. "This isn't just fraud, Savannah," she said, her voice cool, assessing. as she scanned the documents I laid before her. "This is identity theft on an industrial scale." I nodded, my throat tight. "He's been monitoring me. My assets. My emails. My investments. Everything." Judge Foster tapped a fingernail against the forged deed. "If we move too soon, we won't catch the full extent of his operation." I held her gaze. "So what do you suggest?" Her eyes narrowed. "What do you want to do?" I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. "I want to let him think he's winning." That night, I walked into our apartment like nothing had changed. I let him kiss my cheek, poured me a glass of wine, told a half-hearted laugh at one of his stories. All the while, I knew he was stealing from me in real time. But Ethan wasn't the only one playing a game. Because while he slept peacefully beside me, arm draped across my waist like I was already his possession, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, planning his downfall. Ethan thought he had me under control. That was his first mistake. His power didn't come from his own wealth. He had none. Everything he owned, he stole. What he truly excelled at was manipulation, making people trust him, invest in him, defend him. But I knew how to cut ties. Quietly. Methodically. At lunch the next day, I met with Margaret Hale, senior partner at Whitman & Lauren, the most powerful law firm in Chicago. She was polished, ruthless, and exactly the kind of woman Ethan underestimated. I slid a folder across the table. Inside was proof that one of her paralegals, Robert Langley, had processed fraudulent paperwork for Ethan, documents tied to my stolen deed. "Langley has been working with my fiancé," I said, stirring my tea. "Forging property deeds. Shifting assets into shell accounts." Margaret flipped through the pages, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is enough to bury him. And probably a few others," I murmured. Her expression didn't change, but I saw calculation in her eyes. If word got out that Whitman & Lauren had employees involved in fraud, it would be a public disaster. Finally, she set the file down and met my gaze. "What do you want?" "Your cooperation," I said smoothly. A beat passed. Then she gave a single, quiet nod. Langley would be gone by morning. Ethan had just lost one of his key players. And he didn't even know it yet. That evening, over dinner, I dropped my first hint. "Judge Foster's taking a personal interest in the Henderson case," I said casually, swirling my wine. Ethan's fork froze midair. "The Henderson estate?" I nodded, sipping. "She thinks there are some irregularities." He recovered quickly, flashing that practiced smile. "I'm sure it's nothing." But later that night, I caught him checking his phone 3 separate times. His carefully crafted mask was slipping. Good. A week later, Ethan tried a new tactic. "We should do a destination wedding," he said one morning over coffee. "Italy. Maybe next month." Next month. I widened my eyes, feigning hesitation. "That's so soon." His smile was warm, reassuring. "I'll take care of everything. You just have to say yes." I let my gaze drop, pretending to consider. "Maybe," I whispered. He squeezed my hand across the table. "I just want us to start our life together, Savannah." Liar. That night, while Ethan was supposedly working late, Luke called me. "We found something," he said. My stomach tightened. "What?" "There's a man. Jacob Stone. He's a cleaner." I froze. I knew what that meant. Stone wasn't just a hired hand. He specialized in erasing problems, destroying documents, covering financial tracks, making evidence disappear. "He's scheduled to meet Ethan tomorrow afternoon," Luke continued. "At your brownstone." The world tilted again. Ethan wasn't just stealing from me. He was about to erase any proof I had ever owned my own home. I gripped the edge of my desk. "Let it happen." Luke hesitated. "Are you sure?" I glanced at Ethan's empty suit jacket draped over a chair. Polished. Expensive. Hollow, just like the man who wore it. "I'm sure." Ethan thought he was covering his tracks. He had no idea he was walking straight into mine. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Ethan humming in the shower. The steady stream of water masked his voice, but I caught fragments of a tune he often whistled when he felt victorious. He thought he was winning. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling, calculating. If Jacob Stone was meeting Ethan today at the brownstone, then this was the moment to let him act. The more rope Ethan thought he had, the tighter the noose would become. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom, crisp in his tailored suit, he leaned down to kiss me. I let him. His lips brushed my cheek, warm but empty. "Dinner tonight?" he asked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Of course," I said smoothly. "I'll cook." His eyes softened. He loved believing in this illusion of domesticity. I loved that he couldn't see it crumbling beneath him. As soon as the door closed, I was on the phone with Luke. "Follow Stone," I instructed. "I want to know everything he touches, everyone he speaks to." "Already on him," Luke said. "He's been in Chicago less than a week. Hotel near the Loop. Keeps to himself. No paper trail, which is typical for someone like him. Make sure he doesn't suspect," I warned. Luke chuckled, low and confident. "Don't worry. Stone doesn't know I exist." Hours later, while Ethan was charming his way through whatever lies he'd planned, I stood in the shadows across the street from my brownstone. Luke was beside me, eyes fixed on the property. At exactly 3 o'clock, a black sedan pulled up. Jacob Stone stepped out. Mid-40s. Broad shoulders. Clean-shaven head. A man who radiated efficiency. He unlocked the front gate with a key I never gave him. My stomach twisted. Ethan had handed him access to my life like it was nothing. We watched as Stone disappeared inside. Minutes ticked by. The weight of silence pressed down until Luke's earpiece crackled softly. He had planted a small recording device near the entry earlier that morning. Through the faint static, I heard papers shuffling. The scrape of furniture moving. And then, Stone's low voice. "All right. Let's clean this up." He was methodical. Precise. He moved through my home as if he owned it, dismantling years of memories with practiced indifference. Luke's jaw tightened. "He's destroying evidence." "Good," I whispered. "Let him." That evening, when Ethan returned home, I was at the stove stirring a pot of pasta sauce. I turned, smiling like nothing in the world had changed. He loosened his tie, crossing the room to kiss the back of my neck. "Smells amazing." "Long day?" I asked lightly. He shrugged, slipping into the role of the weary but devoted fiancé. "Meetings. Clients. You know how it is." I set 2 plates on the table, forcing myself to laugh at his small talk. But beneath the table, my hands curled into fists. If he only knew that I'd already seen his chessboard, and I was the one moving the pieces. Over the next week, I tightened the net. Margaret Hale had done exactly as promised. Langley was gone from Whitman and Lauren, quietly dismissed before his corruption could taint the firm's reputation. Ethan didn't mention it, but I saw the strain in the way he tapped his pen against his glass, the way he checked his phone compulsively during dinner. I kept feeding him subtle triggers. A stray comment about Judge Foster's scrutiny. A casual mention of irregularities in trust accounts. Each word chipped at his carefully constructed mask. He was unraveling. Then came the gala. Every year, the City Legal Association hosted a black tie fundraiser, and Ethan insisted we attend. "It'll be good for networking," he said, smoothing his cufflinks. For him, networking meant targets. I wore a black silk gown, hair swept into a sleek chignon, diamonds glinting at my ears. Power armor. Ethan loved when I dressed like this, because it made us look untouchable together. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, laughter spilling like champagne. Ethan worked the room effortlessly, shaking hands, flashing that smile. But I wasn't watching him. I was watching who he approached. The Hendersons. Old money. Vulnerable estate. Exactly the kind of family Ethan liked to sink his claws into. I saw the way he leaned in, charm dripping from every word, planting seeds of trust. My jaw clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. The more he exposed himself, the easier it would be to end him. Halfway through the night, I excused myself and slipped into the hallway. Luke was waiting in the shadows, dressed like staff. His circling the Hendersons, I said. Luke's lips twitched. Figured as much. I've already tagged his phone. We'll know every call he makes after tonight. Good, I murmured. Let him talk. Let him plan. Because every word, every message, every forged document would lead straight back to him. By the time the gala ended, Ethan was glowing with satisfaction. He slid into the car beside me, his hand resting possessively on my thigh. Tonight was perfect, he said. I turned my head, smiling faintly. Was it? He didn't notice the edge in my voice. He never did. 2 nights later, Luke delivered the breakthrough. Savannah, he said, laying a file on my desk, you were right about the Hendersons. Ethan's already initiated a fraudulent trust transfer. He's moving fast. I flipped through the documents, my pulse quickening. The pattern was identical to what he'd done to me, and to those women before me. This is enough, Luke continued. We could take it to the feds right now. But I shook my head. Not yet. I want the full scope. Every account. Every name. Every accomplice. When this comes down, I don't just want Ethan in handcuffs, I want his entire operation incinerated. Luke studied me, then gave a slow nod. All right. But don't wait too long. Men like him get desperate when they feel the walls closing in. I knew he was right. I could already sense Ethan's desperation bleeding through his calm facade. That weekend, Ethan surprised me again. I booked us a trip, he said, sliding 2 tickets across the breakfast table. Tuscany. We can get married there. Intimate. Romantic. I forced my eyes to widen, lips parting in feigned astonishment. Ethan, that's beautiful. But so sudden. He reached across, squeezing my hand. Don't think of it as sudden. Think of it as inevitable. My stomach twisted. He was accelerating. Which meant he was running out of time. Perfect. That night, I stood at my bedroom window, watching the city glow. Ethan was asleep behind me, his breathing deep and even. I pressed my palm against the glass, feeling the cool night air seep through the frame. He thought he had me trapped. That by moving fast enough, he could outrun the truth. But predators forget something vital. When you hunt the wrong prey, the prey can hunt back. And I was no longer prey. The next morning, I visited Judge Foster again. She scanned the new documents I laid before her, her expression hardening. This is worse than I thought. He's moving quickly, I said. If we strike too soon, he'll slip through. But if we wait, we'll catch him with everything, she finished. Her eyes lifted to mine. Savannah, this will end him. But it will also put you directly in the fire. Are you ready for that? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the women before me, the families he destroyed, the lives he shattered for profit. It was about justice. 2 days later, the fire began. Ethan came home late, his jaw tense, his tie loosened carelessly. He poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow. Rough day? I asked, feigning innocence. He shot me a sharp look, then forced a smile. Just business. But I saw it, the crack in his armor. That night, while he showered, I slipped his phone from the dresser. Luke had already cloned it, but I wanted to see for myself. Emails. Wire transfers. A web of shell companies that stretched across states. And one new name. Jacob Stone. The cleaner wasn't just erasing documents. He was managing offshore accounts. My blood ran cold. Ethan was escalating. I slid the phone back just as the water shut off. By the time Ethan stepped out, towel slung low around his hips, I was already under the covers, eyes closed, pretending to dream of a life he would never give me. The following week, the tension in our apartment grew thick enough to touch. Ethan's polished mask still clung to his face, but I had learned to recognize the cracks. The restless tapping of his pen. The way he scrolled through his phone with more force than necessary. The faint tremor in his hands when he thought I wasn't looking. He was nervous. And nervous men make mistakes. One evening, while he sat in the living room nursing a glass of whiskey, I lingered in the doorway, pretending to scroll through my emails. You've been working late a lot, I said casually. He didn't look up. Clients? Anything interesting? Finally, he glanced at me, his smile quick, sharp. Nothing you need to worry about. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Of course not. He thought the conversation was over. He didn't notice the way I studied him, cataloguing every flicker of discomfort. The next morning, I met Luke in a quiet cafe tucked into a side street where no one who mattered ever went. He slid a folder across the table, his expression grim. His moving larger sums now, Luke said. Offshore accounts. Conman Islands. Luxembourg. The works. I flipped through the documents, bile rising in my throat. How much? 7 million so far. Could be more we haven't traced yet. I closed the folder, forcing a slow breath. He's getting sloppy. Which is good for us, Luke said. Then his gaze hardened. But Savannah, if he suspects you're onto him. I know, I cut in. That's why he can't suspect. Luke leaned closer, lowering his voice. Then we need a trigger. Something that makes him expose himself faster. Something he won't be able to resist. I thought for a moment, then smiled. Greed. That night, over dinner, I set the bait. The Hendersons called me today, I said lightly, stabbing a piece of roasted chicken. Ethan's fork paused midair. Oh. They're looking for someone to help restructure their estate. They think I'd be perfect to guide them. I kept my tone casual, but inside, my pulse pounded. Ethan forced a laugh. Of course they do. You're brilliant. I told them I'd think about it, I added, sipping my wine. His jaw tightened just enough for me to see. By the end of dinner, I knew he'd take the bait. The next day, he couldn't help himself. I watched from across the ballroom-sized lobby of the Hendersons' building as Ethan slipped through the doors, flashing his most charming smile at the concierge. He thought he was clever, sneaking in to offer his help behind my back. What he didn't know was that Judge Foster had already arranged for federal agents to monitor every meeting, every email, every phone call. By the time Ethan walked out of that building, his clients were already working for me. That night, I played my part. How was your day? I asked sweetly as he poured himself a drink. Productive, he said with a grin, too pleased with himself to notice the steel in my gaze. I'm glad, I whispered. And I meant it. The more confident he felt, the harder his fall would be. 3 nights later, the cracks split wider. Ethan returned home late, his shirt rumpled, his tie askew. He slammed his briefcase onto the counter, poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, and drank it in one swallow. What happened? I asked, keeping my voice light. Nothing, he snapped, then caught himself, plastering on a smile. Just, delays. I arched a brow. Delays. He waved a dismissive hand. Clients hesitating. Paperwork misfiled. It'll be fine. But it wasn't fine. He was unraveling, and he knew it. Luke confirmed it the next morning. He's panicking, Luke said, sliding another file across my desk. Emails show he's reaching out to new contacts. Riskier ones. People who don't ask questions but charge high prices. Desperation, I murmured. Luke nodded. He's accelerating everything. Transfers, forged documents, all of it. He's burning through his network faster than he can rebuild it. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my lips. Good. Let him burn. The final trigger came a week later. Ethan suggested dinner at a high-rise restaurant overlooking the lake. It was the kind of place where the view did most of the work, where the lighting was soft enough to make anyone look like they belonged. Halfway through the meal, he reached across the table, taking my hand. I've been thinking, he said softly. I forced myself to meet his gaze, my expression open, trusting. About what? About us. About the future. I don't want to wait anymore. Let's fly to Tuscany next week. Just the 2 of us. We can get married there. Start fresh. My stomach twisted. Not because of the lie, because of the danger laced inside it. A rushed overseas wedding meant access to my passport, my accounts, everything I was. I lowered my eyes, pretending to consider. That's a big step. He squeezed my hand. It's the right one. Trust me. Trust. The word tasted like poison. I looked up, let my lips curve into a small smile, and whispered the word he wanted to hear. Maybe. Later that night, while he slept soundly beside me, I slipped out of bed and opened my laptop. Luke's latest report waited in my inbox. Transfers. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. And one name repeated again and again. Jacob Stone. The cleaner wasn't just handling the brownstone. He was laundering Ethan's money, covering his tracks internationally. I sat back, the weight of it pressing down on me. Ethan had escalated beyond fraud. This was organized, calculated, dangerous. But it also meant he had tied himself to someone else. And ties could be pulled until they snapped. The next morning, I called Judge Foster. "We're close," I told her. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "Then be careful. Men like Ethan don't go quietly." I knew she was right. But I also knew something else. Ethan believed he was the hunter. He didn't realize the ground beneath his feet was already gone. 2 days later, Luke sent me a single text. His meeting Stone tonight. Private warehouse. South Side. My pulse thundered. This was it. I grabbed my coat, steadying myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back, eyes sharp, shoulders squared, lips pressed into a line of steel. This wasn't just about reclaiming my life. This was about ending Ethan's game once and for all. At 8 o'clock sharp, I stood in the shadows outside the warehouse, Luke at my side. The night air was cold, biting, thick with the scent of oil and rust. Through the cracked windows, I saw them. Ethan and Jacob Stone. Papers spread across a metal table. Voices low, urgent. Luke pressed a small device into my hand. Recorder. Every word goes straight to the feds. I nodded, slipping it into my pocket. Inside, Ethan leaned forward, his voice tight. "We need to move the money faster." She's starting to ask questions. My chest tightened. He meant me. Stone's reply was flat, professional. "Fast costs more. You want it clean, it takes time." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "I don't have time." The words echoed in the empty space, sharp and desperate. And I knew, right then, his mask was gone. The warehouse was colder inside than the night air. Metal beams groaned under the weight of years, and the scent of oil clung to everything. I crouched near a stack of crates, heart hammering, every muscle taut. Through the shadows, I could see Ethan and Jacob Stone under the single hanging light bulb. A pool of pale yellow surrounded them, leaving the corners in darkness. Papers littered the table. Bank transfers. Property deeds. My life reduced to numbers and signatures. Ethan's voice carried, sharp and impatient. "We need to move faster. She's asking questions. If she finds out..." Stone cut him off with a steady hand. "If she finds out, it's already too late. You rushed her brownstone, and now you're sloppy. Sloppy gets people caught." Ethan's jaw clenched. His hand tightened on the glass of whiskey he'd brought with him. "I'm paying you to fix this, not lecture me." Stone didn't flinch. He leaned back, folding his arms. "Then listen. We accelerate the transfers tonight. Offshore. Multiple accounts. After that, you disappear. Change your name again. Like Boston. Like Miami." The words hit me like a blade. Boston. Miami. Confirmation. 2 women before me. And I was supposed to be the third. Luke's voice crackled softly in my earpiece. "We've got enough. Federal agents are in position. Just give the word." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay still. Watching Ethan, watching his mask finally fracture, was intoxicating. He was no longer the polished man I had fallen for. He was frantic, desperate, dangerous. Not yet. I wanted him to hang himself with his own words. Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "And what about Savannah?" My stomach twisted hearing my name on his lips, cold and transactional. "She trusts me now," he continued. "Once we're married, I'll have full control of her accounts. I just need you to keep her assets clean until then. After that, she won't matter." Stone nodded once, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. And that was my breaking point. I pressed the transmitter in my pocket. "Now," I whispered. The warehouse exploded with motion. Federal agents swarmed from every corner, flashlights cutting through the dark, voices booming commands. "FBI! Hands where we can see them." Ethan froze, eyes wide, his mask shattering completely. Stone cursed under his breath, reaching for the papers, but agents were on him in seconds, pinning him against the table. Ethan turned, wild-eyed, scanning the shadows. And then he saw me. I stepped into the light, my heels clicking against the concrete, my gaze locked on his. "Savannah," he breathed, disbelief etched into his features. I said nothing. Agents shoved him to his knees, snapping cuffs around his wrists. He twisted, fighting, but it was useless. "You set me up," he spat, his voice cracking. Finally, I let myself smile. "No, Ethan. You set yourself up. I just let you." The next hours blurred into flashing lights, paperwork, and the sterile corridors of the federal building. Ethan's voice echoed in my mind, sharp, bitter, desperate. But louder still was the sound of the cuffs locking around his wrists. Luke stayed by my side through it all, silent, steady. "You did it," he said finally, when the adrenaline began to ebb. I shook my head. "We did it." 1 week later, I walked back into my brownstone for the first time since the nightmare began. The front door creaked, the familiar scent of wood polish and dust wrapping around me like an embrace. It was mine again. Truly mine. I moved slowly through the rooms, running my fingers along the edges of furniture Ethan had tried to steal, the bookshelves he had nearly emptied. In the study, I paused by the safe he had broken into, the violation still echoing in the silence. But this time, the silence wasn't loss. It was reclamation. Judge Foster called that afternoon. "He accepted the plea deal," she said, her voice crisp. 20 years. Possibly 15 with cooperation. But he won't see freedom anytime soon. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. 20 years. Longer than I had known him. Longer than he had spent building his lies. Enough time for him to rot in the cage he deserved. "They recovered the rest of the assets," she continued. "Not just yours. The women before you. Boston. Miami. Their lives may never be the same, but at least they'll have justice." Justice. The word warmed me more than I expected. 2 days later, Ethan's lawyer reached out. "He wants to see you," she said. I hesitated. I didn't owe him anything. But part of me wanted to watch him realize, face to face, that he no longer had power over me. So I agreed. The federal detention center was cold, sterile, suffocating in its fluorescent brightness. Guards led me into a visiting room, the air humming with tension. And then he was there. Ethan. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, shackled, his once pristine appearance already fraying at the edges. The arrogance was gone, replaced with something hollow. He sat across from me, his eyes searching my face. "I never wanted it to end like this," he said finally, his voice low. I tilted my head. "You mean you never wanted to get caught?" His jaw tightened. "I cared about you, Savannah." A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. "No, Ethan. You cared about what you could take from me." His eyes darkened, but he had nothing left to bargain with. I stood, smoothing my blazer. "You played the game well. But you forgot one thing." I leaned closer, my voice a whisper only he could hear. "You were never the smartest person in the room." And then I walked away. That night, I hosted a small dinner at my brownstone. The people who had stood by me filled the house with warmth and laughter, Judge Foster, Luke, Margaret Hale, and the federal agents who had worked behind the scenes. We raised our glasses, the crystal catching the light. "To reclamation," I said, my voice steady. "Of property. Of trust. Of justice." The glasses clinked, the sound ringing like victory. Ethan had tried to erase me. Instead, I erased him the days after Ethan's sentencing passed in a strange blur. For the first time in months, I wasn't living in constant vigilance. No forged deeds to uncover. No secret meetings to monitor. No pretending to laugh at a man who wanted to erase me. Freedom, I realized, is quiet. Almost disorienting. I spent the first week reclaiming the brownstone. Contractors repaired the damage, restoring the doors and windows stone had tampered with. I repainted the study myself, brushing over every mark Ethan had left behind. Each stroke of paint felt like an exorcism, banishing the ghost of him from my walls. When the rooms were finished, I opened the safe again. This time, not with fear but with certainty. Inside were the documents that proved what was mine: property titles, investment records, the artifacts of a life Ethan had tried to rewrite. They were safe now. I was safe now. But safety wasn't enough. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, I sat at the antique desk with a stack of letters spread before me. They were from Rebecca in Boston and Lauren in Miami, the women Ethan had destroyed before me. Lauren had nearly gone bankrupt fighting him. Rebecca had disappeared from her industry entirely. Their stories were hauntingly familiar, but their strength was undeniable. "Because of you, I finally have a piece of my life back," Rebecca wrote. "Because of you, I'm not alone anymore," Lauren added. I wiped away tears, not of grief but of resolve. Ethan had underestimated all of us. He thought we'd vanish into silence. Instead, we were rising. That night, I invited them both to Chicago. We sat in my kitchen, drinking wine late into the evening, our laughter spilling into the air where Ethan's lies had once lingered. For the first time, I saw not victims but survivors. "We should start something," Lauren said, swirling her glass. "A network. For women like us." Rebecca nodded. "Yes. Imagine if we'd found each other sooner. How much pain we could have spared." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "Then let's build it. A foundation. Legal resources. Financial protection. A way to stop men like Ethan before they ever start." In that moment, I knew Ethan's legacy wouldn't be what he intended. It wouldn't be the ruin he left behind. It would be the strength we built in response. The media frenzy came next. News outlets called it the fiancé fraud. Headlines splashed Ethan's face across every screen: "Charming conman exposed by bride-to-be." Journalists wanted interviews. Networks wanted exclusives. I declined them all. This wasn't about fame. It was about justice. Still, I couldn't escape the whispers in courtrooms and boardrooms. Some looked at me with pity. Others with awe. A few with fear. But none of them looked at me the way Ethan once had, like prey. Luke stopped by often during those weeks. He'd sit across from me at the kitchen table, his files replaced with bottles of craft beer. "You're different now," he said one evening, watching me over the rim of his glass. I arched a brow. "Different how?" "Stronger. Sharper. Like someone who's seen the fire and decided to walk through it anyway." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I have." For a moment, silence stretched between us, comfortable and steady. Then Luke added, "You know, Savannah, not every man out there is Ethan." I met his gaze, searching for the weight behind his words. "I know," I said softly. And for the first time, I almost believed it. Months later, when the foundation officially launched, I stood before a room full of women. Survivors. Lawyers. Advocates. Each of them carrying scars, each of them holding power Ethan could never steal. "Men like him," I said, my voice steady, "count on our silence. They count on shame. On fear. On the belief that no one will believe us." I paused, letting the truth sink in. But we are not silent anymore. We are not powerless. And together, we are unstoppable. Applause filled the room, loud and fierce. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that had eluded me for months. Hope. Occasionally, late at night, I thought of Ethan. Of the man who had once charmed me with a smile at a gala, who had whispered promises of forever, who had looked at me like I was the center of his world. But then I remembered the warehouse. His voice, sharp and desperate, asking what to do about me. "She won't matter." Those words no longer cut. They fueled me. Because in the end, I mattered more than he ever imagined. On the anniversary of his arrest, I hosted another dinner at the brownstone. Judge Foster came, Luke, Margaret Hale, Rebecca, Lauren. The rooms glowed with laughter and light, the clink of glasses echoing against restored walls. When we raised our drinks, I looked around the table, my chest swelling. To reclamation, I said again. But this time, the word carried even more weight. Reclamation of our homes. Our lives. Our voices. The glasses clinked. And as the sound rang out, I knew Ethan's story was no longer about the destruction he caused. It was about the fire he ignited in us to rise stronger than before. And that, more than prison bars or frozen accounts, was the punishment he never saw coming.